With just 3 weeks until the Ivy League tournament, the next Ivy League beat reporter, Jenn Hatfield, is here to chat everything from player and rookie of the year contenders to tomorrow's matchup between Princeton and Columbia. We're also going to talk about who has surprised and impressed this season, who to expect to make the conference tournament, and more.
Ogunbowale for the win. Good!
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Hello and happy Friday. You are locked on to women's basketball. I'm Natalie Heavren, and I'm a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for The Next. Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. If this is your first time listening to Locked On Women's Basketball, welcome. We at The Next have over 100 reported pieces every single month. We have a beat reporter on every single WNBA team, one on more than 15 different NCAA beats, so get that YouTube subscription up. And you can also support us by subscribing to The Next, $9 a month, $72 a year at thenexthoops.com. Today, we'll be talking about the player and rookie of the year races in the Ivy League, what to expect when Princeton and Columbia take the court on Saturday, who to expect in New York City for the Ivy League tournament, and more. Joining me today is Ivy League and Washington Mystics beat writer and managing editor here at The Next, Jenn Hatfield. You just wrote a fabulous story about top contenders for Ivy League player and rookie of the year. Can you take us through the player and rookie of the year frontrunners and what they've accomplished so far this season?
Sure. Thanks for having me back, Natalie. Always a treat to get to talk Ivy League and be on the pod with you. So starting with player of the year, my front runner right now is Columbia guard Abby Shue, who's a senior and a likely WNBA draft pick after the season. She's basically doing everything you can ask for. She's averaging over 20 points a game, which leads the league. She's the best guard rebounder in the Ivy League. She's shooting 39% from three, but has diversified her shot selection to include everywhere on the floor. She's often taking the toughest defensive assignment on the perimeter. Like literally, there's not much more you can ask of her, and she's just been phenomenal. So she's definitely one to watch every time she steps on the floor, and she leads a crowded field of player of the year candidates. But she'd be my pick right now. And then on the rookie side, Penn's Matea Gale is a really exciting freshman point guard to watch. She can play point guard, she can play shooting guard, but she's mostly running the point right now for Penn, and she's still averaging over 15 points a game, which is best among Ivy freshmen. She is fearless. I wrote a story earlier this year about her, and kind of her distinguishing factor, at least in my eyes, is she's just so happy to challenge herself against the top players. She was really excited about going head to head with Abby Shue. Very happy to challenge herself against Harmony Turner, even when Harmony Turner had a big game when Penn played at Harvard. She just has this kind of youthful, loving spirit about the game, and has been really doing everything again for Penn. They have a couple other stars as well, but she's been, she's had the biggest role of any Ivy freshman, I would say, and I think is a pretty clear favorite at this time to take home the award.
And with 4 games left in the season, is there anything that needs to happen for your opinion to change?
I think if my opinion were to change, it would be a combination of those two frontrunners kind of falling off a little bit from their really high standard, and other players kind of elevating themselves. Like I said, the player of the year race, I think there are more candidates who could make a big push in the last 4 games, whereas on the rookie side, I think there's kind of a clear Gale is the top number one, and then Sky Belker, I think, is probably the only player with much of a shot of catching her. So that, I think, is a pretty clear race from here.
And you don't need to go into every one of the players that you talked about in your story, but who are some of the other candidates like Sky Belker in both of those award races?
Yeah, so I'll start with Sky Belker, a freshman guard. She's stepped in to fill some absences due to graduation that Princeton had. She's started from day one. She's the first freshman to do that under Carla Berube. And she has been impactful offensively and defensively. She's the Tigers' third leading scorer, and she's also taken on some pretty big defensive matchups for them, including guarding Abby Shue in the team's first meeting. So she's just been rock solid. Her assist to turnover ratio is good. So she just, plays like a much, freshmen aren't always known for being super composed, and she's definitely composed and has fit right into that Princeton identity right away. And then, for player of the year, you have to talk about the reigning player of the year, who is Princeton guard Caitlin Chen. For Caitlin, she's right there with Abby. They're both electric players in different ways. Caitlin has really added a three ball this year, which she didn't necessarily have earlier, which just makes her drives to the basket even more challenging to stop. I think for her, it's kind of challenging for voters because Princeton also has Madison St. Rose, who is a player of the year candidate in her own right as a sophomore guard. And so first, as a voter, you have to decide, is Caitlin even the best player on her own team, which is kind of crazy when you're talking about a defending player of the year, right? But so that kind of, push-pull between those two could make it hard to vote for Caitlin, just if you're not 100% sure that she's the best player on her team. But yeah, I think, Saturday's matchup we're going to get into, we'll get to see Caitlin versus Abby again, which will certainly be a data point. We don't want to overstate the importance of one game, but definitely seeing them head to head will give us more information on that race.
And then in true Jen fashion, you did some statistical research and had a really fun chart noting the winners of both Player and Rookie of the Year over the past 30 seasons and their team's finish in the Ivy League. Were there any trends or patterns that stood out to you, and what were your findings?
Yeah, I decided to kind of look up winners for both awards over the past 30 seasons on a variety of things, grade level, position, team played for, stats. The stats were the hardest, but the probably the most striking findings were on the team finish. And I found that 25 of the past 30 players of the year played for a team that won at least a share of the regular season Ivy title. So it seems like the head coaches who vote on the award are very much subscribing to the best player on the best team philosophy for voting. And then rookies of the year, though, it's a totally different story. Only 7 of the 30 were on a team that won at least a share of the title. And rookies of the year have been on teams that finished as low as 7th in the 8-team league. So they can really be kind of all over the place. And it makes some intuitive sense because, in the Ivy League, which is not a league that often has players transfer out before they graduate, older teams tend to be pretty good. Your championship teams tend to have at least some, veteran experience and rely on those veterans. Whereas the team that relies heavily on a freshman, the kind that might win a Rookie of the Year award, might, be kind of in that building process. But it was just a really striking difference, 25 of 30 versus only 7 of 30.
So with the team finish in the Ivy League for Rookie of the Year, were some of those lower placed finishes further back in time or, more recent?
Yeah, the 2 times that a player from a 7th place team has won Rookie of the Year, it's been actually very recent. So Shayna Mehta from Brown, if you know that name, and Sienna Durr from Columbia are the 2, and those have all been in the past, I believe, 7 or 8 years. So it's actually been kind of a recent phenomenon, and obviously there aren't a lot of instances, so I can't say for sure if it's a trend, a change in the way that coaches are voting, but yeah, that's definitely been a more recent thing. But then on the other hand, you have Madison St. Rose who won it on a championship winning team last season. So we'll see how that trend kind of which direction it goes in over the next decade or so. Maybe I'll still be here in 10 years to tell you all about it.
I was going to say, I intend to read that follow-up story in 10 years, so you can let us know then. Coming up next, we'll preview Saturday's matchup between Columbia and Princeton. Today's episode is brought to you by Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style size, and budget. They do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want, no subscription required, and they send 5 just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. I keep what works and send back the rest. My stylist always sends just right pieces, and the fit is on point. It's like they have Style ESP. I don't know how they do it, but they just get me. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy. I don't like to shop, and they save me that time and effort. Plus, I get outfits that make me look and feel really good. And if you don't love something, just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. stitchfix.com/lockedon. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So I'm sure Saturday has probably been circled on your calendar for a while. Columbia is hosting Princeton. It's Abby Shu's senior day. What are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think just like the vibes, like all the vibes. It's going to be a great day for the Ivy League. With these top 2 teams battling with a share of first place on the line. So Columbia is currently a game back of Princeton. So they could, if Columbia wins, then they'll be tied atop the conference. And it's going to be at Columbia. It's been sold out since Monday. And just kind of the way that Columbia's gym is, the fans are really like on top of the players on the court. It feels very small and intimate and loud. And so it's just going to be a great atmosphere. Add to it that it's senior day, and I think it's going to be electric. So I think it'll be a really great display of Ivy League basketball. And I think we'll be treated to a really good game. I'm excited that it's the second matchup between these teams. They've kind of seen each other once and kind of maybe shook out some of the nerves, or, Columbia is somewhat of a young team around Abby. Like, they've now got a Princeton game under their belts. Like, I'm looking forward to some really high level basketball in a really fun environment.
And what are the keys to the game for Princeton?
Yeah, for Princeton, I think in number one, as with any team that plays Columbia, they've got to defend Abby Shu. She's scored, right around her average the first time they played, but she was defended really well by Sky Belker and had to take a lot of shots to get there, and was also in a little bit of foul trouble. And so for Princeton, it's like trying to have lightning strike twice, right? Like it's going to be hard to keep Abby from an efficient performance, but they've got Belker that they can put on her. They can put, say, Rose on her. They can even put Caitlin Chen on her if they want. They've got a lot of options to try to slow her down. So that's definitely going to be a key. And then, in the last game, Princeton really pounded the ball inside, got a lot of paint points, and won the rebounding battle, got a lot of second chance points, and they'll need to keep doing that. Columbia will start most likely a smaller lineup. They could go a little bit bigger depending on who they choose for their 5th spot, but they'll likely start, and they play a lot of 5-guard lineups. So, and they're pretty good rebounding despite that. But Princeton has Ellie Mitchell, who is the queen of rebounding. So they need to really exploit that. And then, when Mitchell goes out, they can bring a lot of size off the bench and they can try to kind of pound it down Columbia's throat in that way.
And on the other side, what are the keys to the game for Columbia?
Yeah, the first one, and Megan Griffith, the Columbia head coach, talked about it today in or yesterday in her pregame media availability. Is going to be ball security, taking care of the ball, not giving up, especially live ball turnovers. Princeton customarily has a really stout defense, puts a lot of pressure on you, and Columbia has to stay poised and be able to execute their really elite offense despite that defense. So it's kind of a strength on strength situation. Columbia is also going to need to be on their toes defensively. In the last game, they kind of over-rotated, over-helped, and that really added to Princeton's ability to score inside, because when you over rotate, you often leave people open in places you don't want to leave them open. So they'll kind of have to shore that up. And then the other thing is, uncharacteristically in the first meeting between the teams, Abby Shue was the only starter in double figures. I haven't checked the stats, but I would wager that has not happened very often, if at all, this season outside of that game. And they did get 20 points from their bench, but Griffith said yesterday that that's kind of a reflection of them having to go to their plan B, right? Like, if your starters aren't scoring, then you need to get that scoring from their bench. And really, in this kind of game between the top two teams, you really want, your best players against their best players. And so seeing where Columbia is able to get its scoring from, I think is going to be pretty instructive as far as how the game is going.
And going off of that, what else happened the last time that these two teams played, and what do you expect, if anything, to be different?
Yeah, it was a pretty exciting game. Columbia ripped off a first half run and kind of seemed to be kind of in control. It was a close game, but they seemed to kind of have the upper hand in the first half. And then Princeton really shredded Columbia's defense in the second half and came out with a fairly comfortable win at home. So it was definitely kind of like a tale of two halves. We had some foul trouble with both Chen and Shue, which hopefully we don't see again. We don't want any of that. One thing to note that was kind of a surprise last game was that was the first game that Carla Berube slid senior Chet Nweke into the starting lineup. She'd previously come off the bench. She's kind of an undersized forward, really a guard who can rebound. And previously Berube had been going with much more size, but kind of downshifted to be able to match up with Columbia a little bit better. And it worked really well. And Nweke stayed in the starting lineup. She's been great lately, really elevating her game, playing like a senior, all those cliches. And so seeing, now that Columbia is expecting Nweke in the starting lineup, what do? They have got, a post player who's been coming along recently in Susie Raffu, who just had a great game at Harvard. So does she play more? And then does that cause Berube to go big again to deal with that? So I think kind of that like interplay between how the post rotations work is going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch. This is going to be a late season chess match here. Other than that, I don't expect many surprises, but it'll be fun to see how the coaches kind of react to what the other one does.
And we talked about Abby Shue earlier in the segment, last segment as well. Last weekend, she became Columbia's all-time leading scorer. Can you just talk about how that happened and what her reaction to that was?
Yeah, so she'd been chasing down Camille Zimmerman for Columbia's all-time scoring record, which is across men's and women's basketball, by the way, which is pretty cool. She'd been chasing Zimmerman down for a while, and she finally crossed that threshold at Dartmouth on a free throw. So that was really, an exciting night for the Columbia program. Dartmouth announced it at a media timeout, which was very nice. And then Shue got the game ball after. So it was just a really nice moment for them and for Shue. And so now she's at 1,989 points heading into this game. So big round number coming up. But yeah, she's set herself apart. She already has the Ivy League record for career threes, which also means she has the Columbia record. She's got this points record. She's setting records often and really kind of rewriting the Columbia and Ivy League record books. So so now she's in fourth place all time in the Ivy League women's basketball in career points. So and she could have a chance to get to third by the time she's done here.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels like she reaches a new milestone every weekend. And with that in mind, and this being her last season playing collegiate basketball, what legacy do you think she's left on Columbia in that program?
Oh man, how much time do we have, Natalie? She has left such a big legacy. If you ask Griffith really credits Shue with, really accelerating the growth of the program. And a lot of credit has to go to Megan Griffith too. Megan Griffith is a Columbia alum. She came in 2016. The winning percentage of the program in its entire D1 history was not pretty, in like the 30s when she got there. and Griffith has really, really built it up. But kind of the turning point, as Griffith gives credit for, is when Shu came on campus in 2019, and since then they've won more than 3/4 of their games. So she's been the superstar scorer who has also made her team around her better. She's not a ball hog. She lifts others up. She creates space for others just by her presence. She's got, Griffith has said she kind of draws people to her in a way that no other player can really replicate. And she's just been a great leader. That's something that, being a vocal leader didn't always come super naturally to her, but she's really grown into that. She's a co-captain now. So she really just, embodies all of what Griffith has tried to build at Columbia and has helped elevate her team to, its first ever share of an Ivy League title last season, its first couple of WNIT appearances the past 2 seasons, a run to the WNIT championship game last year. So really they've had, it is not too much to say that they've had unprecedented success with Abby Shu leading them there. And, next year that's just going to be a huge hole to fill. And, they've obviously got a lot of younger talent as well, but frankly, she's irreplaceable, both for the league and for Columbia.
Having big shoes to fill sounds like a problem, a later problem, one for your Ivy League preview, but no need to think about that now. Coming up next, we'll get into who Jenn expects to make the Ivy League tournament, who's impressed her the most, and more. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire every week, we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. One player that I have my eye on is Marvin Bagley III, who is the likely starting center for the Washington Wizards after the team traded Daniel Gafford. And Bagley is definitely worth grabbing for fantasy leagues. He started the last 3 games before the All-Star game, and he started again last night. In 12 games with the Wizards this season, he's averaging 13.3 points and 8.2 rebounds per game. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. I really, really love my Honda Accord, but I would not consider myself a car person. I forgot the last time I replaced my tires, thought they needed to be replaced. Turns out they were only 2 years old. Really awkward situation. But that's where eBay Motors comes in to save me and make handling all of my car repairs easy. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly with brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. For the listeners who may not be paying as much attention to Ivy League basketball, just the top 4 teams make it to the Ivy League tournament. So who is in contention for those 4 Ivy Madness spots?
Yeah, so Princeton and Columbia have clinched their berths already, so they're in. The 3rd spot seems very likely to go to Harvard, barring a big run from somebody else and some slip-ups from Harvard. And then the 4th spot is kind of the one that's a little up in the air right now. So basically the 3 contenders for that spot are Brown, which is 5-5 right now and is a great story of program building. Penn, which is 4-6, and Yale, which is 3-7. So that's kind of the short version of what we're looking at with 4 games to play.
And who do you think ends up on the outside looking in terms of just based on what is coming up on their schedules?
Yeah, if I had to pick right now, I think Brown will take that 4th spot and leave Penn and Yale on the outside looking in. The three teams in contention have fairly comparable schedules. Yale probably has the easiest in air quotes, but also has a lot of ground to make up here. So it might just be hard to catch the other two teams. Basically looking at it, if Brown and Penn, and I'm gonna use air quotes again here, if Brown and Penn win the games that they are, quote, supposed to win, then Brown should end up with a game advantage over Penn and space over Yale as well. So I would put my money on Brown, which is a pretty great story after they won only one league game a couple of years ago and are now in control of their Ivy Madness destiny.
Yes, and I just thank our listeners quickly for dealing with some interruptions from Locked On Women's Basketball as one of the mascots, Sheba, who has often attempted to make an appearance, but
we love Sheba.
we do. And what team or player has surprised you the most this season?
Yeah, I won't go into too much depth because we've talked about them a lot here, but Columbia, frankly, I was not expecting them to be quite this good. I was expecting them to be a top 3 team. I wasn't necessarily expecting them to be a championship contender because they lost half their points and minutes from last season. I mean, they had Abby Shue, but basically all their leading scorers from there graduated. So it's really a credit to Griffith that this program has not missed a beat. I've said to her, it's kind of ridiculous that you've lost everything that you did, and we're asking you whether your team is better this year. Like that's crazy, but they are right there, and they've definitely been better than I expected. So that's definitely been a surprise. And then on the individual player side, we'll exclude the freshmen because I often don't have a great read on the freshmen before they come in and show me. So I guess kind of all of them have been a surprise. But one player I'll shout out who's playing really well lately is Harvard sophomore forward Katie Krupa. She's a stretch forward. She can shoot the 3 really well. But she's just been dominating with a bunch of 20-point games. Over the past month, she's looked like an all-Ivy player. And, particularly with Harvard's star forward, Elena Rodriguez out, she's kind of, put the team on her back from the front court position. They have some really talented guards, but she's kind of been that complementary piece that they've really needed. So she's looked great, and I wasn't necessarily expecting that from her. We saw, some flashes last year, but she has really stepped up for them.
What team or player has impressed you the most?
Yeah, I think Columbia has definitely impressed me. Abby Shue has impressed me, as we've talked about. Princeton has impressed me for the ability to keep things rolling. They didn't graduate quite as much as Columbia did, but they lost some really key pieces, and they've had young players step up. In the win over Columbia the first time, the thing that really stuck out to me was the youngins doing the work. Like Caitlin Chen was in foul trouble. Ellie Mitchell, who's a senior, had a great game, but beyond that, it was Belker, it was St. Rose, that's a freshman and a sophomore, and then freshman Ashley Chia came off the bench to run the point without Chen and was super steady. So the youth movement at Princeton is, they're good for a while. They'll be good for a while. So that's impressed me. And then, at the other end of the standings, I think we got to give a little mini shout out to Dartmouth. They just won their first Ivy League game in almost exactly 2 years over the weekend against Cornell. And so it's not that they've impressed me necessarily by becoming world beaters, but under first-year head coach Linda Semino, they've really shown kind of just a different vibe about them, for lack of a better word. There's a fighting spirit. There's joy in that program, which is hard to do when you're losing. They had a good non-conference that really kind of set them up well. They're working on their weaknesses. There seems to be a plan to get better and a path forward for them. And so, the results, as our fearless leader, Howard Megdal, often says, the wins are kind of the last thing to come, right? And so Dartmouth isn't necessarily at that point yet, but you can see them kind of laying the initial groundwork that one day could help Dartmouth, get back into, this group of teams that were talking about contending for Ivy Madness spots.
Yeah, and as someone who's covered a team that went winless in conference play. Seeing a team make sure that they don't go winless in conference play, especially a second year in a row, is always special. So thank you for joining me today, Jenn. Where can the people find you and your work, especially with the Ivy League tournament coming up?
Yeah, so always head to thenexthoops.com for all of our work. I'll be filing there from the Ivy tournament in New York City. You can also find me on Twitter at Jenn Hatfield 1. That's Jenn with 2 N's. And yeah, those are the main places to find me. And then, of course, all of the Next Hoops social media, like Instagram here.
Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. And make sure to tune in tomorrow to hear from our WNBA draft crew.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.